Welcome back to another stakes preview. Kaitlin Free and Scott Shapiro going to be previewing a few races leading up to the Kentucky Derby and the Kentucky Oaks this weekend via Florence. Up first is going to be the Bourbonette Oaks. 100 points on the way to the Kentucky Oaks. Decent field sign on here. We got a lot of new shooters, a couple faces already in from Turfway Park that we've seen around the parts. And this hasn't been as big of an impactful race as of late, the way that Jeff Ruby has on, say, the Kentucky Derby. But I think this is a stronger renewal of the Bourbonette Oaks, and we've seen him quite some time. Scott, what do you think?
I think it's a really fun race. The Jeff Ruby probably has a little more top heaviness to it, star power. I think Botanical, who we'll talk about, of course, the clear one to beat and maybe merits respect if she can rattle off another win. But this is the second leg, Kaitlin, of the Bayou Bluegrass Pick 5, a phenomenal wagering opportunity available anywhere you can go. But the TwinSpires is clearly the place to play this one, a $5,000 hit it and split it available to TwinSpires players. Remember to opt in. Great sequence throughout. And the Bourbonette Oaks, I know the favorite makes a lot of sense in here, but there's more than Botanical in this spot.
Yeah, I definitely think there is more than Botanical. She was the one that definitely really stood out to me, but there's some new shooters there, especially intriguing. I know you ended up on one of those new shooters. We also talked about Bolvie going to be making, I believe, what's her first North American start. And there were a couple of the local horses that I liked a bit more, but as you said, it's definitely a little bit deeper than just Botanical, but she is going to be getting the acid test, I would say, in this start today.
Well, she's the clear one to beat without question. And what's been most impressive, other than just the dominant win she's put forth since arriving in Florence, is that she's been able to win when on the front end, and then proved last time out she could sit well off the pace if somebody's going to go crazy, which I think the pace is going to be pretty hot in here, Kaitlin. There's plenty of speed types signed on. I don't really want anybody that needs the lead in this spot because of that. Full field, plenty of early zip to the inside and outside, but I'm not worried about that in terms of Botanical. If I'm going to try to poke one hole in Botanical, coming back off just 3 weeks rest off that career best 91 Brisnet speed rating, I don't think Brad would necessarily rush her back, but this is kind of the spot you're going to want to run in. You know, she's proven the form over the all-weather. I'm sure she'll either try the turf or the dirt sometime very soon after this meet is over, but it makes sense to try this. That would be my only concern. I know you're on her though, right?
Yeah, she is going to be my top selection here. And I pretty much echo what you say with the pace. And that was really the reason I ended up with her, because she has been so strong in every race she's ran here at Turfway Park. She's a perfect 3 for 3 so far this season. And I was really looking to get a little bit more out of her in that last race last time out, getting that stakes win. And she did come from off the pace in that race, because that was another race when I looked at it on form, and certainly the way it ran, it definitely had some speed in it. And you won't see a horse win a race easier. I think she's almost better coming from off the pace. I mean, she just flew by in the stretch, and it was just so effortless. I was able to speak to her trainer, Brad Cox, following that win she had last time out. And I asked him kind of what he thought about how she came out of the race. He said she came out of the race absolutely fantastic. And he kind of alluded to me for sure that the Kentucky Oaks, as long as she runs well in the Bourbonette, is going to be very much in play and probably where she will head next, because she has had a couple of really good races on the dirt. It was before she did break her maiden over, obviously over the synthetic, but she seems to be such a stronger and more developed filly now at this point. I don't think the dirt is going to be any issue for her moving on to the Kentucky Oaks. And as we saw, you know, Who's Your Philly, Wonder Wheel, and a couple others have come off losses last time out and are kind of trying to regain that leg up, whereas Botanical has done absolutely nothing wrong. So I think Brad alluding to her going to the Oaks, him running her here and getting her another race, honestly gave me more confidence to pick her in this spot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I totally understand why they would try the dirt in the Kentucky Oaks if things go well here. And with Flashy Gem also in for Brad, you're almost certain that they're not going to ask Chris Landeros for an aggressive ride out of the gate. I'm going to look to a big price. I am going to use Botanical as well as my long shot top pick here in the Bluegrass Bayou, the aforementioned Bayou Bluegrass pick 5. And it's number 7, Miss New York. Now, the all-weather surface at Turfway is going to be a question. And I do think that all these synthetic surfaces play differently, but she does have a win at Gulfstream Park last year to break her maiden, where I thought she had every reason to not win. She was wide throughout that day and ended up winning, and came back for her first start as a 3-year-old at Tampa on February 18th, going one turn over the dirt. So obviously different than what she did. She's going to need to do to win this race, but she won for absolute fun. I thought it was a very impressive effort. She's handy. She can be kind of work out her own trip. I don't want her on the lead. I think jockey Jose Morelos will be able to kind of sit that second tier here, kind of probably right outside of Botanical, actually. But I like Miss New York at a big price to run a big race, though, but a little bit of a wild card in this spot.
I saw earlier when you picked her, I kind of had the same thought that she would probably get a very similar trip to Botanical and kind of has that handy tactical speed type of look to her. And one thing that I've really noticed when comparing the all-weather surfaces, certainly agree with you that they all kind of play different. The one I think that is most similar to Turfway is probably Gulfstream as far as, substance. And when you pick them up and feel the texture, they're very similar. But really, the only difference to me is obviously Gulfstream is a lot more fair because the weather doesn't change like it does here in Kentucky. So really, that's probably the most consistent form. I looked to a little bit of a price in here as well. That's the 9. She Will Ghost You for trainer Eric Reed, jockey Sonny Leone, and owner Rick Dawson. Same connections as Rich Strike, last year's Kentucky Derby winner. I was able to talk to Rick Dawson before she broke her maiden last time out, and they were really looking to get her into a 2-turn race over the all-weather, because ultimately it's kind of been easy to see that what she's wanted to do was get to 2 turns. And as soon as she got to 2 turns, she got a little bit of a pace in front of her. She ran a very fantastic maiden race. They weren't sure she was going to be able to get into this race because all she does is have that maiden win a couple other maiden starts. But I think if the pace has a chance of falling apart in here, I think she drew pretty well and has a chance at a big price, because I think she will be relatively ignored in this spot with some of the other ones. She has a chance to kind of blow up the board at a big number somewhere.
Well, she's going to get the right trip, at least the way we see it, with a lot of speed, and she's going to be a big price because her speed figures simply look too slow. But I respect the thought process. And sometimes when races fall apart, like we saw last year in the Kentucky Derby with these same connections, looking at speed figures a little too much can be a problem. I think the rest of the field, we can probably just discuss it as a whole. A lot of speed, like we talked about. I got to ask you about one horse before we're done, though. I mean, the fact that you didn't pick her tells me all I need to know. And the fact you didn't even want to mention her, but we've got a European import, Brendan Walsh, Irad Ortiz Jr., I would think has the right running style. No interest in Bolivar?
She does have the right running style, and Brendan Walsh does have pretty good numbers with horses coming in first start under him in North America. And I kind of took a counter approach with Irad Ortiz this week. He's just so heads and shoulders such a good jockey and towers over a lot of the jockey colonies he rides in. But Turfway Park is not a track that he is super familiar with. And these local jockeys know how the track plays. They know how the weather comes into effect. They know what spots on the track are good and aren't. And Irad's going to be a quick learner, and he may learn by the time this race rolls around. But that was kind of my only thorn to really pick in her side. And Exceed and Excel as a sire kind of has decent numbers over the all-weather, more so on turf, I would say, and has Galileo and kind of that Sadler's Wells on the bottom side. And that doesn't really work out as well on the synthetic either. So she was one that I definitely did give a look to, but ultimately, just like Botanical and some of the horses that already have experience over the Turfway surface just a little bit more.
All right. Well, enough for me. I'm not going to, you did mention the weather. I want to say that it does look like there could be some significant weather in Northern Kentucky, something to keep an eye on. With me, Irad Ortiz Jr. definitely does ride better at different places, some other places that he spent more time at. But I think this all-weather surface at Turfway is going to fit him perfectly. His one fault, if you're going to find one to me, is being a little under aggressive at times. But I think it's particularly in this race, but in general, I think saving ground and finishing is the most important skill you can have in Florence.
I would certainly agree with you. And as you said, got to watch that weather. Oftentimes when it rains, the track will slow down in places, especially on the rail, it'll tighten up. But I think it's going to be a little bit slower because it's supposed to be in the 60s and 70s in the next couple of days. And we've shown when it has, been a little bit warmer, the speed tends to not hold as much. When the track tightens up and it's colder and almost freezes a little bit, that's when it's like a conveyor belt and you can pretty much merry-go-round the whole way around. So I'm anxious to see how it plays. Overall, it could end up being pretty fair with the little bit of rain and with a little bit of speed, but remains to be seen.
Well, should be a lot of fun, and I know you'll be out there. I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you. And it looks like you're going to be hanging down with Joe and Kevin and the gang and Fairgrounds. So excited to preview and see what you guys do with those races, of course, on the Bayou Bluegrass Pick 5 as well. But we'll wrap this up here with the Bourbonette Oaks and continue on to the next big one.